Good evening, folks. Dorothy, can you confirm that we have quorum? Thank you. I'd like to call to order the meeting by beginning with the land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treated people. We received regrets from Amber Gross, Councillor Hinch, Taylor, Chioma, Daryl, and Missy. I invite Anzio staff to please recite the affirmation.
We acknowledge that African teachings, strength, and perseverance continue to challenge and inspire our community. And if we stand tall, it is because we stand on the shoulders of many ancestors.
Thank you, Jaslyn. I'd like to now move on to the approval of the minutes from our April 10th meeting. Do members have any errors or omissions to the minutes of the April 10th meeting 2025? If there are none, can I please get a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes? Moved by Renee, seconded by Carlotta. The minutes of the April 10th, 2025 meeting are approved as circulated. All those in favor say aye, and those opposed say nay. I declare the motion is carried. Item number 3, approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Dorothy, do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No additions or deletions have been received by the clerk's office.
Thank you, Dorothy. Members, do you have any additions or deletions to the agenda? If there are none, can I have a mover and a seconder to approve the order of business as presented? Moved by Andrew,
I'll second it.
seconded by Jerry's. Thank you. The agenda is approved as presented. I declare the motion carried. Item number 4, business arising out of the minutes. There are no business items arising out of the minutes. Number 5, do any members have any would any members like to declare a conflict of interest as a result of an agenda item? If there are none, I'll move over to the next agenda item. Considerations of deferred business, there are none. Correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Dorothy, has there been any correspondence received by the clerk's office?
No correspondence or petitions has been received by the clerk's office, Chair.
Thank you, Dorothy. Dorothy, have there been any petitions received by the clerk's office?
No petitions either.
Thank you, Dorothy. Do members have any petitions? If there are none, I'll move over to the next item. We do not have a presentation today, and there are no information items that have been brought forward for this meeting. I'll move over to item 9.1.1, the Anzio Monthly Update. Do members have any questions on the circulated handout?
I did have one question. It's just about the racism conference. I was just wondering who the presenters and speakers were at that session.
So there was a variety of speakers and presenters, but specifically for our keynote speakers, we had Malik Adams was one of the keynote speakers, Megan Neves was another keynote speaker, and Ashley Hill was our third keynote speaker. And then we had a variety of youth performances. So we had spoken word artists and dance performances, and Owen Sound performed musical selections as well.
I have a question. Is there any way the committee can support the future success of the conference?
Yes. So we can definitely engage the committee in future offerings, well in advance to get any input from committee members too as well. And also it'd be nice to have, maybe some committee members can identify some folks from community that might be able to contribute to future offerings. So we could definitely bring that to the agenda in the future.
Thank you, Russell. Are there any other questions on the circulated handout? Nope. If there are no further questions, I can move on to item 9.1.2, the update on the public safety strategy and the community mobilization team. I invite Amy Siciliano, Public Safety Advisor, Define, please excuse me for mispronouncing your name, Beve Onyenike, Community Outreach Coordinator, and Lillian Ash, Director of Programming and Partnerships, to provide a presentation to the committee. Some of you folks are familiar to me, but maybe not so much the other members, so please introduce yourselves.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Wonderful. I am Amy Siciliano, and I'm the Public Safety Advisor with HRM in the Department of Community Safety. And I'll introduce you to my colleague who's co-presenting with me today before I trip here.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Divine Beve Onyenike, and I work as a Community Outreach Coordinator in the Public Safety Office.
Thanks, Divine. And if you could just bear with me 1 second while I get our presentation. Oh, that was easy. Okay. Well, thank you. It's a real privilege to be here. This is the first time I'm being introduced to this committee, and I'm just grateful that you exist and look forward to collaborating with you in future public safety strategies. So my role is I lead the research and development team in the Department of Community Safety. And my job really is to oversee the development and implementation of the strategy. And my colleague, Lillian Ash, Director of Programs and Partnerships with Community Safety, is responsible for most of the implementation of the actions. And so I kind of bring it into fruition and pass it over to her team mostly, although we do have some other collaborators that we work with. And then I step back, and my second role is to monitor and evaluate whether how we're doing with the strategy, if we're achieving our goals and objectives. So, I'll talk a little bit about the strategy, how we developed it, how we engaged communities of African descent and African Nova Scotian communities. I'll talk a little bit about how we are evaluating the strategy. And I'm going to turn it over to Divine, and she's going to get into some of the specific work that we do with African Nova Scotian communities and communities of African descent. So let's get started here. Good. All right. So the strategy that we have today, the public safety strategy, so the kind of the bigger picture there, it really builds on work that's been happening in the community for a long time. It started back in 2006 when the then mayor convened a roundtable to help us as a community come together and think about how we could do things differently. At that time, there was a lot of violence in the downtown core related to alcohol misuse primarily, and other violence in the community. I know there was a specific focus in the review on the disproportionate effects of African Nova Scotian communities. The research was led by Dr. Don Claremont, who at that time was a criminology professor at Dalhousie University. He's since retired, but if you know Don, still heavily engaged in the work. And so he produced a report called Violence and Public Safety in the HRM, which had a series of recommendations. One of the most important ones was to create a position, which today I occupy, that could really help steer the municipality, I would say, in a more holistic and upstream vision of what community safety could look like. So rather than what had been up until then traditionally relying on an enforcement approach, what could we do more broadly? What could we do with community, and what could we do more upstream or preventative focused? So a position was created back then. Unfortunately, the administration put it in HRP, so it really didn't do what the doctor was envisioning with this report. Fast forward to 2014, a new mayor is elected, and one of the first things he does is do a roundtable review. And so looked at all those recommendations to see where they were and how they've moved forward or didn't. And so that led to the public safety position, the public safety advisor being pulled out of police and put into the CAO's office. And the idea there is that if you put someone, much like our diversity and inclusion team, if you put something that's really important, that we know is important, kind of at the top of the organization, it's more likely to permeate throughout. And so that was the idea of putting the position there. I joined, and so my predecessor, Ted Upshaw, was the first non-police, although he had a background in policing, non-police public safety advisor position. He worked really hard to create the municipality's first public safety strategy. So that was approved by council in 2018. Went to council the day after I think he retired, and then I got the job and was charged with implementing this very, I would say, aspirational, very big document. Okay. Let me see here. So, that strategy, I would say, despite its intimidating size and ambition, led to many successes. And I would encourage you, you'll learn about some of them today that we started back then, but I would encourage you to look at the annual reports, because we're required every year to report to regional council on our progress. And all of those are found on the public safety website. But I just want to highlight two that I think are really important. So first, going back to Claremont's vision, that strategy really broadened the way that we see and understand public safety, away from a kind of police-centric view toward more upstream-focused, ecosystem-based. So who are all the players and how do we get them to work together? Where really the community has a primary role to play in creating safer communities. The second thing it did was forge new pathways and renewed relationships with many of the key players in the community safety ecosystem. And it did that by creating an initiative that that Divine will talk more about today, but the community mobilization team. So I'll let her talk about that, but that is great work that started back then. So the current strategy, as you see there, 2023 to 2026, so we're going to our last year, is really informed by the work that was done previously. We knew that we didn't want to stop that work, and it's embedded in this strategy and resourced a bit better than it was. It was approved by regional council in 2023. And, one of the things that this new council, or the previous council did, that the new council is continuing, is it created a new business unit. So one of the things that we learned was that if we are really going to get into the business of community safety, so community-led, community-designed, community-informed safety, we need a strong foundation from which to do this. We need to have a home, so to speak. And that business unit is our new home. So now what used to be, you may have heard of the Public Safety Office, which for a long time was me and Lillian, is now an entire business unit with emergency management, community standards, food security, housing and homelessness, and research and development, and programs and partnerships. So the old Public Safety Office, Lillian and I kind of broke into two teams so that we could do our work more effectively. Okay, so I'm going to go back in time now and say how we developed the strategy. So when we started this work, one of the things that we were acutely aware of, because we had been working with communities on the old public safety strategy, is that many communities were tired of talking to us and telling us what we should do. In fact, there'd been a lot of reports when we were starting this work that had already gone to council, to community councils, to the Board of Police Commissioners, to staff around ways to improve community safety with specific recommendations. And I'll touch on those in a few minutes. And so we said, you know, we're not going to start by going just out broadly and saying, what should we do? We're going to start with what people have told us to do, see if they are in scope and if they actually are within our mandate and the realm of possibility. Look at those first and come up with kind of recommended actions and action areas to put in our new strategy. So out of that, step one, we had a draft strategy and we refined it. And then we went out to community and said, hey, we did our homework. This is what we believe should be our direction based on what you told us. Does it make sense? Where did we get it wrong? So kind of validating and refining. And so that was we started the consultations in step 3. After that, we went back, did some refining based on what we heard in those consultations, and then we took it to regional council, and it was unanimously approved in March 2023. And as I said, one of the recommendations was give us a home to do this work. And in the fastest I've ever seen administration move, I think it was a week later, we had a new business unit. It was remarkable. So really demonstrating the commitment to this work. Okay, so I understand that one of the things that's interesting to you is how we engage communities of African descent in the development of the strategy. So one of the first things we did was invite ANZIO in to the group that was charged with developing the strategy. And so the ANZIO advisor at the time was invited in as a part of the working group. We also did engagements internally with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And as a part of that document review, looked at several existing HRM strategies, some of which were exclusive to Black communities, some of which we know had large input from those communities. So these included the Social Policy Framework, the HRM Anti-Black Racism Framework, the Diversity and Inclusion Framework, and then other reports and engagements such as the Defunding the Police report, which was created as a subcommittee it was a community-led subcommittee of the Board of Police Commissioners, the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission Street Checks report, which is often referred to as the Wortley report, the Youth Project, 2S LGBTQ+ community engagement, the Anti-Black Racism and HRM What We Heard report, and the Women and Gender Equity Strategy Consultation Report. So those are some of the key documents. There's more, and they're in the Public Safety Strategy if you wish to learn more about the other documents that informed the work behind the strategy. So after we reviewed those, as I said, and came up with some draft actions and action areas, we went to community to present and get some feedback. And so we did targeted engagements. I'm not going to read the list, but those are some of the key organizations, initiatives, relationship, and organizations, initiatives, and key stakeholders that we reached out to do targeted engagements. And those engagements were not led by us. We thought it was important to have a third party do that, so we brought on a local not-for-profit consulting firm to help us with that. And then we also did an online survey. And that was through a tool that the municipality has called Shape Your City. We pushed it out through targeted social media awareness, and we made sure that we targeted geographically communities that we knew were historic African Nova Scotian communities. Okay, so I broadly speaking, I'm not going to talk about all the actions in the strategy, and I believe that Dorothy shared with you the most recent update we provided to Regional Council. And if you want to really dig in, or if you want to ask more questions, We can certainly chat about that afterwards, but I'm just going to give you a high level kind of view of what the real goal of the strategy is, and I've spoken to this a bit. But we want to strengthen the ecosystem. We believe that well, we don't just believe, the evidence shows that creating strong communities requires more than just one player. It's definitely not just police. Police are actually not at the center of creating safer communities. They play a role, but there's many players in the ecosystem, and we see our job to help bring them together and lift them up so that they work together. So, and there's risks of not doing that, right? And I think we know those risks. They've been documented. We can criminalize issues that don't have a criminal dimension to them. And those processes of criminalization disproportionately affect racialized communities, Indigenous communities, and other communities that have been marginalized by structural factors. And to do this work in the right way, we have to put communities at the center of everything we do. And it's easy to say that. It's really hard to do that, as I'm sure you're aware. And so that's something we aspire to, and we think about every time we move forward with an action or initiative that we're trying to get off the ground or trying to improve. Okay. So these are the broad action areas that came out of the strategy. And let's see, within each of those, there are 14 actions, and all of them are focusing in some way on how to improve protective factors. And so that's strengthening things that exist in community that could use some help with more protection. Reduce risk. So we know some individuals and communities that are at higher risk for harm. So how do we reduce those risks? Often it's through improving those protective factors. And also ensuring an appropriate response to harms. So I'm not going to get sidetracked here, but one of the big projects we're working on right now is an alternative response to mental health and substance use crises. So right now, police are primarily responding to those calls, and we're building an alternative community-based 24/7 mental health and substance use crisis response service that we will launch this year. Yeah, so that's the other part, which is ensuring there's more appropriate responses when harms do happen or at a high risk of happen when somebody's in crisis. Okay, so how we're monitoring and measuring impact. Well, this is a work in progress, and it's not easy work because it's not just a matter of with police data, you collect things like events after they happen. And so we don't have access to that type of, when you're doing prevention work, how do you demonstrate that something didn't happen? It's more complex. And so that's why our monitoring and evaluation framework is more complex. And it's under development. I will say that proudly, HRM was selected as one of 10 municipalities across Canada to participate in an initiative funded by Public Safety Canada. It's called the Community and Urban Safety Monitoring Tool, and we're working for the past year and a half with municipalities across the country and some experts across the world, actually, to try and figure out what's the best way to measure and monitor the impact of this work. So briefly, how are we doing this this monitoring and evaluation framework? So each strategy action, so on every one of those 14 actions has an outcome, which is the change we want to make over time. Sometimes there's more than one outcome. We track the activities within each of those actions that we know are contributing to this change we're aiming to make. Each of those activities are informed by a theory of change, or sort of like the evidence behind why we should be doing what we're doing, okay? And we also measure, where we can, specific programs. So I lead a new community safety training initiative. One of the trainings we're offering is nonviolent crisis intervention training, trauma-informed nonviolent intervention training. And we have an external researcher at the Claremont Center for Community Safety at Dalhousie University, who's independently evaluating the impact of that particular program. So when we have resources, we do an external evaluation of those programs. It's not possible at all times, and where it's not, we do our best by tracking those activities and doing surveys and other ways of evaluating impact. And finally, we are collecting population level measures. And those are kind of indicators of what the state of safety is in society. So that's when the crime stats would be valuable, you know, and especially if they're disaggregated by race and geography and gender, because they allow us to see more broadly what's happening, an indicator of safety and community, and know where we should be focusing our work or thinking about in the future what we need to be doing better. And I'm going to hand it over to Divine now.
All right, so just to continue from where Amy stops, we're going to be looking a little bit towards how this strategy has specifically worked with the Black community and people of African descent. So one of the big things that came out of the Mayor's Roundtable that Amy spoke about was the community mobilization teams. So basically, this is a community-led approach that is focused on prevention, preparing, and responding to community violence and critical incidents. CMTs work out of 3 different buckets. So we work out of crisis preparation, crisis intervention, and crisis prevention. We also have currently 7 CMT communities that are active. So we have one in Cherrybrook, one in Lake Loom, one in East Preston, North Preston, Central North Halifax, Mulgrave Park, and we recently started our 7th CMT in the Spryfield community. So under the crisis prevention work, what CMT tries to do is to do some asset mapping, training, and education to prepare community for when critical incidents do occur. Under the crisis intervention work, we do try to support community after critical incidents, so offering like a night of caring and healing circles, which I will be talking a little bit more about later. And under the crisis prevention, we try to focus on developing and enhancing local safety networks, as well as strengthen community resilience through unity and collaboration. So we do try to collaborate as much with community-based organizations to host events and different ways to strengthen and encourage community to continue to come together. All right, so some things that CMT has done in the last, I'll say year or so, we do try a lot to really empower and equip our community members to be ready in case of critical incidents. So one of the things that we do is we offer training to our CMT. So as of last year in the fiscal year, we offered 720 hours worth of training. So the trainings that we offered was ASSIST, so Applied Suicide Intervention Training, Mental Health First Aid, CISM, which is critical incident stress management training, and we also offer nonviolent crisis intervention training. So in addition to the 720 hours of training that we offer to CMT, we also have about 258 hours of meeting with CMT. So we meet with each community mobilization team once a month to hear from them, you know, what's going on in community, what are the resources that are needed, what are the supports that we need to bring into community. At those meetings, we also provide information to community. So if there was a previous meeting, if there was a topic that people were interested in learning more about, we try to make sure that we bring in the appropriate person to speak to the CMTs. So for instance, we've had a lot of discussions about, you know, garbage cleanup and so forth around the UNIAC area. So we have tried to bring in people from, you know, 311 and people from the, you know, waste management unit to speak to community about what are the proper processes, the proper ways to report any incidents and any issues that they want the city to work with. We've also focused a lot on community engagement and community events. So we supported and held 8 community events in the past year. We collaborated with 19 different community organizations, so such as the Mulgrave Park Learning and Caring Center, the Preston Area Food Network, and so much more. And through these events that we have held, we have engaged with about 530 community participants. Following critical incidents that have happened within HRM, we have responded and supported community following 15 critical incidents that have happened. And as well as increasing knowledge about trauma and its effects, we have worked on developing a collaborative community response plan, which I would talk a little bit more about, which is focused on providing healing circles and providing supports to community following critical incidents. And we have up to date hosted 14 community healing circles, and we have engaged with about 130 community participants. So just to speak a little bit more about the CCRP, which is the Collaborative Community Response Plan. And this plan is really focused on the crisis response component of the buckets that the CMT work out of. So the main goal of our CCRP is to provide an ongoing support to trauma responses, address the root cause of trauma, and providing psychoeducation to promote healing, well-being, and building resilience for future critical incidents. So part of our CCRP focuses on some of the four different buckets I have there. So relationship building for stronger communities. We also like to provide community members with strategies for coping with, grief and hardship. We also provide mental health network and support. We also provide mental health work, and these are often supported by level 5 clinicians. And we always make sure that we use culturally relevant lens when interacting with community members. So part of our CCRP, there are 2 supports that we currently provide to community members. So we have our Night of Carings, and we also have our healing circles that we offer to community to provide support. So our Night of Carings often are hosted following critical incidents, and the main objective of our Night of Carings is to offer a brave space for community members to come together to seek healing and be supported by trained clinicians, have active listeners, community volunteers, and spiritual leaders that are present in order to support. So up to date, we have as of 2024 into 2025, we have supported and activated following 7 critical incidents. So an example of that is following the Africville incident that happened last year. Our CMT and our public safety office did reach out to various community-based organizations, and we came together to collaborate and work on a Night of Caring, which was held at the Africville Museum following the critical incident. We've also recently, following the double homicide that happened over the New Year's, we have also worked with the Preston Township to offer a Night of Caring for community members to come and seek support. So those are some of the work that we're currently doing inside of the Night of Caring component. In terms of the healing circles, the main objective of our healing circles is to provide residents with an opportunity to learn and engage among their peers. So right now we are holding healing circles on a monthly basis, starting with the Preston Township. The main reason why we are starting with the Preston Township is we've had a lot of requests from them to offer ongoing support to community, especially following the recent incidents and everything that has happened. Community members were looking for opportunities to come together, to learn, to share their stories, to receive support. So we've right now started our monthly healing circles with the Preston Township, and we host that on a monthly basis. So coming up this month, we have one coming up on May 20th that is going to be held at the North Preston Recreation Center. And we've had a large turnout coming to those. So we've worked with about 350 community members. And of course, turnout at each session is based off of what is happening in the community, how much people have going on and so forth. And we have really received positive responses from community members as a result of the healing circle. We've had a lot of instances where an individual comes by themselves, and then the next healing circle, they're bringing in their cousins and their brothers for them to also come and be in a space where they could learn and get some resources that could really help them deal with any trauma or any critical incidents that they may be experiencing. And also with these healing circles and Night of Carings that we have, we always make sure that these sessions are facilitated by a level 5 mental health clinician. And these sessions are always supported by myself. We also have certified active listeners. We also have trained CMT members that are always present. And we also have spiritual leaders that are always present to support community so that we can offer a holistic approach to helping community. And we always make sure that our sessions are always being ran using a culturally relevant lens. And another component of the work that we have been doing under the CCRP is supporting the Preston Area Response Trauma Working Group in their It's Healing Time project. So the main objective of this project is to focus on African Nova Scotian communities to promote healing through a series of event-focused grief and trauma and psychoeducation, psychosocial well-being and community engagement. So to date, the Preston Township Trauma Working Group has hosted over 20 sessions to community members, and we've engaged over 700 community members in grief and trauma workshops and/or sessions. And participants at these workshops range from age 4 to 104. We have also hosted 3 trauma conferences. So the conference that was hosted in January of 2024 was hosted in the Preston Township. And we collaborated with the Part WG to also bring that model. And we hosted a trauma conference as well in Halifax. And then this year, we also hosted a trauma conference on February 15th in the Preston Township. And there was a large turnout. We had about 70 something participants that came out. And another thing to highlight with the sessions that Part WG runs is it's very focused on community needs. So we offer sessions based off of what community is asking for. So for instance, we've held a few men-only sessions for people, especially following the double homicide that did happen over the New Year's Eve. Community members were looking for a space for men to come together and to be able to safely express their feelings. So we did host a men-only session, a men's only session following our Night of Caring that we hosted on January 6th. We also offered, our next session, actually, the most recent session that we did hold for men actually was held on April 29th. So this is an ongoing thing that we are offering to community. We also hosted women-only sessions, which goal was to provide a safe space for women to come and share their unique experiences with trauma and healing. The goal of this session was to facilitate an open discussion and offer resources that is tailored specifically to the needs of women. We also offered a youth session, which was focused on providing youth with the tools and supports that they need to cope with trauma and grief. We ensured that the discussions that were held at the youth session was really focused and tailored to the needs of the youth. And we've also hosted school-based sessions in Nelson Wider Elementary, which was focused on equipping our educators and students with the strategies to recognize and support those who are dealing with trauma and grief. Yes, I believe that is it. So overall, with the Person Era Trauma Working Group, what is focused on is really, as CCRP works at a community level, the Person Era Trauma Working Group try to work more on a group and individual level. So if a group of people come together and say we're looking to get information on a specific topic, we would connect them to the Part WG for them to host a session that is focused specifically on that group and what they're looking to learn about. So that is all I have, and I'll pass it back to Amy.
Thanks, Divine. So just to wrap up, strategies in year 3, and some of the things that we're looking forward to this coming year is, that I mentioned before, the launch of the Community Crisis Service. We're also realizing that we need to build capacity across community for the prevention of hate and violent extremism. So we are working with Public Safety Canada, who there's a specific department that has expertise in this field, as well as an organization of Montreal. We did a workshop back in March, and we're going to continue that work to help us better understand how this issue shows up in Halifax and what we can do as a community to strengthen our response to it. We will be hosting the Canadian Centre for Safer Communities National Conference. So this is a national organization, membership-based, of municipalities that are doing very similar to work that we're doing here in HRM. I'm really excited. They're all coming here. It's going to be a wonderful opportunity. Tickets are on sale. So if you're interested, I'm happy to share more information. We're also looking for speakers who might be interested in sharing their work at this venue. And so if you're interested in that, please reach out and I'll connect you. It'd be great to hear, to share some of the work that's happening across Halifax with a broader audience. We're launching new training. So mental health first aid, we started a pilot. We're going to be launching it more full scale. Bystander intervention training, applied suicide intervention training. And then remarkably, we're going to be starting this whole process again. So love to come back and consult and engage with you as we develop our renewed public safety strategy. So thanks again so much for inviting us here. And I'll speak for Divine, but we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amy and Divine. Questions, members? Go Go ahead.
So thank you for this presentation and the information. I've just got a couple questions about the CMT. So I'm just wondering about with the community mobilization teams. You know, when you said you look at like crisis preparedness, intervention, and prevention, I'm wondering about the prevention piece and what are some of the specific works or the ongoing projects around crisis prevention in African Nova Scotian communities.
Okay, so with the crisis prevention piece, we really focus on collaborating with a lot of events that community already hosts. So what we try to do is to reach out to community and see what events and what activities are being hosted that focuses on bringing community together, providing safe space. So for instance, the Central North always hosts like a beautification day. So we try to support those events and make sure that we provide them with any necessary resources or things that they need in order to make that event more more accessible, provide them with any resources that they need. Same thing, we know that the Preston Township we host like yearly barbecues in that township, which is focused on really providing a safe space for community members to just come together and just have fun and just, enjoy the beautiful weather and so forth and not be focused on, whatever trauma, whatever challenges they might be going through. So we try to provide fun and safe places for communities to come together and just, network, speak to each other, get to know each other, and just, enhance and strengthen community unity would be the best way I could put that.
Oh,
Yes, and also part of the prevention components is we also do offer trainings to our CMTs and also to community at large. So we try to offer training that is focused on, understanding your challenges, understanding, whatever trauma you are going through, and also how to recognize certain challenges and traumas within community members and how to maybe connect them to resources. So for instance, the mental health first aid training is very focused, of course, on understanding your mental health, knowing where you are, but also being able to maybe talk to somebody and maybe be able to help them kind of navigate whatever challenges they may be going through. Same with the critical incident stress management training, which is really focused on, it's a 3-day training that is really focused on helping individuals and community members understand, critical incidents and also know how to deal with the stress that comes along with that.
So looking at crisis prevention in the sense of community building.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And then when you're looking at the training, so you had the first training that you mentioned with the 700 and however many hours. So are those trainings that are offered to the people that are part of the community mobilization team itself?
Yes, yeah. So these trainings are offered to the community mobilization team participants. I know with the public safety office, we also have Song that's doing some training, and they're in the process of developing trainings that will be offered to community at large. But the 720 hours there is focused specifically on the CMTs to make sure that they're equipped with the skills and the tools in order to help themselves and also help community at large.
And so then with the other ones that you had mentioned closer to the end about the mental health first aid and those ones, are those also for the CMT specifically, or are those more for community members at large?
I believe these are more for community members, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
So thanks, Divine. Some of we now have a community training program, and we have a person who's trained to deliver these trainings.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do train staff, much like Office of Diversity and Inclusion does corporate training. But we also will train, and it depends, like our capacity is not that we can advertise these trainings out. Certainly if the committee is interested in receiving these trainings, we have trained council and we can train committee. So if that's something of interest, like we can do that. And when we get requests, say for a specific group, we can try and work with them to figure out how we can do trainings. I can give you an example that one of the things that we recently did with a grant we received from the federal government was do some train the trainer sessions for community organizations like Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center. We trained a couple of staff that they could then go and train their people in
Mm.
the community on nonviolent crisis intervention. So there's ways that we've been able to have a broader reach than our capacity allows when we get kind of resources to do that.
Okay. And then just for my clarity, with the CMT, is there, what am I asking here? So with the CMT, there are volunteers in community, but then also people that work for the CMT employed by HRM. Is that the case?
So the CMT is community led. So we do have volunteers that come from community that work, and then we have 2-3 staff, I would say 2 to 3 staff that works with the CMT. So we're the ones that help to kind of coordinate and plan the meetings for them. We help with like the coordination of events and any activity. So they come to us with what community needs, and we, the HRM staff, try to, in the best, in our best ability, to offer support and resources and programming that would help address the needs that are coming from CMT. So in our team, there are 2 individuals specifically that are focused on the CMTs. So we have 2 community outreach coordinators that work specifically with the CMTs. And then I also work with the CMTs, but my role is also focused on HRM at large to offer a response plan. But yes, there are 2 staff that work with CMT, talk with them on a regular basis, and get feedback from them and get information from them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then just remind me, you said that there's a Cherry Brook, Lake Loon, East Preston, North Preston,
Yes.
and then what were the other ones in Halifax?
So yeah, in Halifax, we have the central north area, so like Uniac area, and then we have one in Mulgrave, and then Spryfield.
Okay. And then my last question is, you mentioned level 5 clinician.
Yes.
So I'm just going to ask, what does that mean? What is a level 5
So
clinician
a
compared
level-
to whatever else?
Yes, so a level 5 mental health clinician is someone that is registered with the mental health department. So it can't just be anybody, I can say. So for instance, we have like social workers that come to these healing circles, and they act more as like a community support, as an active listener. But as a
Mhm.
mental health level 5 clinician, you need to have the certification. So you need to have gone through the course, be registered with I can't remember the name, but like there's a Canadian association that you also have to be registered with. So you need to have that certification that backs you up. And we always make sure that our level 5 clinicians that we also work with also have experience in the African Nova Scotian community, especially when we're hosting healing sessions with the African Nova Scotian community. Yeah. So,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm not really sure who it's directed to, and it's not necessarily focused on any African Nova Scotian community specifically, but I'm wondering where and maybe what sort of prevention work is being done with regards to private security, nightlife, and alcohol use. If anybody can speak to that.
Do you want me to? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thanks for the question. So just to clarify, are you thinking about like how the private security industry could be better equipped to address some of the issues behavioral issues that might arise, or assault issues, or those kinds of?
Yeah, behavioral issues, assault issues. I recognize that community is coming to these establishments as patrons, but I do feel and have seen in my own experience that members are just general members of the community are being assaulted. And I don't think that we're equipped as individuals, especially for me as a bystander. Like, I wouldn't know what to do in that situation. For instance, as somebody who's being legally trained, I understand the legal components of that. But is it safe for me to go into those situations and explain that to private security who are in Nova Scotia unlegislated? So I'm just wondering what kind of work is being done with regards to community assaults and community homicides by private security.
Yeah, that's a big question. So we are not working directly with private security, but that doesn't mean that in a future state we couldn't. Some of the work around the behavioral and criminal incidents that are associated with drug and alcohol consumption or misuse. We have started the work of developing a policy around municipal drug and alcohol. It's very slow moving because it's not, I would say, resourced to the extent that it needs to be for it to be impactful. But Lillian's team, with my support, is leading that work. It's an action in the strategy, and I think out of that, we would kind of come to a place where there would be specific points of intervention that we could work on collectively. And one of those certainly would be helping to support reducing some of the harms that you're, I think, thinking about. There's also something that's in flight, which is co-led by my team and Lillian's team on bystander intervention training. You may have seen it in the media. I think it was just yesterday in the CBC. So we've been working with Diane Crocker at St. Mary's University, who's an expert in this field, and she's helped develop a logic model and training around bystander intervention. And we're just about to launch that, and it would be, I mean, a great opportunity, I think, because we want to launch it out publicly, to be looking potentially at where is the highest need, and I think that could lead us to maybe a geographic focus in those areas, or maybe a focus, if it's possible, on training, better training for security, or better training for bystanders who are community members who are in that area.
Yes, could I have a question? Just to follow up, I would suggest that the HRM be encouraged to put in legislation to police these private security firms and make sure that some of our community members are actually employed by them, so that they don't be doing what they've been accused of. Now, in the strengthening the ecosystem part of your, by the way, thank you for the work you've been doing. The recognition that the police are only one component of creating safer communities. And I added in here, they have a large impact on whether we feel safe or not. Has that been looked at? The huge impact that the police have in determining how safe we feel as Black people. Has that been looked at? Not that you would have an answer, but what I mean is that part of, it just says that you need to recognize that police are only one component. And that got my attention because, yes, they're one component, but their impact is larger than just being one component, if that makes sense. So what I mean is, has that been looked at, that for the fact that they are only one component, they have such a huge impact on our community in terms of our feeling safe?
Thank you very much for that question. It's a really important one. And certainly in the background work that we did to develop the strategy, that was something that came loud and clear in the defunding the police report that was led by the subcommittee of the Board of Police Commissioners. Some of the harms, if I understand you correctly, that
Yes.
are experienced as a result of police presence or police action, particularly for Black communities, African Nova Scotian communities, Indigenous communities, are the ones that rose to the top of that particular report. Certainly the Wortley report on street checks unequivocally demonstrated the harms that police have on the Black community in terms of over surveillance, all the way to how that impacts future criminality. And I would say that in the public safety strategy, the way that we've acknowledged and tried to build those realities into our work is to develop alternative approaches. So the mental health crisis response would be a way for community, if you're experiencing harm or you see someone that's experiencing, if you're experiencing a crisis or you see someone that's in crisis and you know that a police response is likely to increase the harm, we want to have an alternative, and we're building that. And so that's one. I think the community mobilization team work as well, at its heart, is about, like Divine spoke very well about the prevention and preparedness, but also the response. We know that one of the, and this is not a generalization, but when you look at evidence, one of the biggest factors of future criminality is being a victim of a crime. And sometimes that can be because the trauma that comes from being victimized is not addressed, or the presence of a heavy police response without support afterwards can be traumatizing in itself and lead to future risks. And so by building a very community-led approach, it's not going to solve issues tomorrow. This is a generational project that Lillian and her team are leading, but we strongly believe that building up those community supports can actually reduce the amount of the involvement of the criminal justice system in all of its forms in communities that right now are overrepresented in it.
Has the leadership in the police department been engaged with you, or have they been supportive or positive towards, or are they allowing themselves to be questioned by you?
I mean, generally, the police are supportive of our work. They recognize some of the harms that they can cause in community. I think they'd be the first to acknowledge that. I go to a lot of Board of Police Commissioners meetings where they're learning and listening, the commission as well as the staff that are there, including the police. And I would say they have not put any roadblocks in our way to do this work, and have been, when we request, collaborators with us. But Divine may have more.
I can speak in terms of the response component. We have built some good relationship with some officers where they do reach out and let us know of incidents that are happening and kind of, give us the facts that we're able to properly go into a community and support them. So sometimes we do have the police officer send us an email or call and let us know, yes, this event has happened. We see that community is in need of support. Are you guys able to go in and offer a debriefing or a night of caring? So we do have that relationship with officers, that we're able to get that information and know when it's safe for us to also step into community and support.
Okay. Could I suggest that as you're doing community engagement, that let the police know their impact in the community on our feeling of being safe. For instance, if somebody is being brutalized by the police, their family is traumatized by that, even if the person survives it. So that is a long-term thing. So I believe that is something that they need to know. They need to know that it impacts more than who they beat. They belong to a family. I have other questions too, by the way. So, the economic restriction, we're looking at the strategic action areas. One of the biggest problems is the lack of ability to be involved in the economic portion of living in Canada. So going to a bank, getting a loan, buying a car, getting a job, blah, 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 that sort of thing. Has that been a subject area? I didn't see that here. And I was just asking, the economic restriction that our community has faced over the years, if that's part of feeling safe or unsafe. It's not a trick question. I'm just kind of.
No, it's a really good question. Thank you for the question. So within the scope of the work that we do, we have limited ability to change the economic conditions in which some of our communities are living. But we recognize that's a structural factor, and I would say there's things we can do. Divine spoke about the training. So we don't have the capacity or budget resources to hire all of the community mobilization teams as full-time staff. We pay them for work that they would do beyond what would be kind of a minimal volunteer capacity. I believe we still pay them stipends for participating in the training. We feed them. And we take them away and make sure that they are well taken care of for the work that they do in community. So we spend a great deal of resources in caring for them in ways that our budgets allow. I also think that providing those trainings are good doors to open up future economic or work opportunities. Those trainings are.
It's being discussed then.
Yeah, okay, I'll stop then, because I
Yeah.
tend to talk too
Okay,
much. I told myself
one,
not to.
one last question. The root cause, oh, sorry. Did I
Please,
interrupt
go
you?
ahead, no.
The root cause of trauma, after all the work, I have an opinion. I'll say, well, I would say white supremacy, racism was the root cause of trauma in our community. That's my opinion. Have you, after the work, have your group, have you come up with what you think the root cause of the trauma is in our community, or do you need to do more work before you can come up to that conclusion?
I think you nailed it. Yeah, I think like we recognize the role of colonialism, white supremacy, and those as structural factors that disproportionately impact African, Nova Scotian, and Black communities. And I think our work is centered on trying to overcome that in the best way we can with the resources that we have to do it.
Yes, the final point, I hope this is my final. The thing is that one of the things that our community has helped us individually as we're coming up is how to cope with living here, like this system. You're doing great work in terms of that, how to cope with it, but there needs to be some sort of a focus on what it is that they're coping with. What do we do to change it? Is there any chance that you would be criticizing the white racists at any point?
Yeah, I
Rephrase
think
it.
I'm gonna ask Divine's help for that question, but I think quite clearly in the public safety strategy through the background documents that we use to inform it, we acknowledge the role that systemic, institutional, and individual racism plays in the harms that happen here in Halifax, particularly with African Nova Scotian communities, Black communities, Indigenous communities. I'm not sure if that fully answers your question. Did you want to add anything to that?
So we usually also work with Robert Wright, who is, one of the, I believe, the owners of the People's Counseling Clinic, and he does a lot of training in terms of understanding white supremacy and how that can affect you and how, that can affect the community at large. So we do try to the best of our ability, to bring in experts that can do those trainings and give us that understanding to be able to continue to do our work.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy, Lillian, and Divine, for all the work that you do. It's great. I'm going to follow up a little bit on what Andrew mentioned about prevention, but I'm going to state that trauma and crisis, those are really important in our community. But when we're dealing with that, that's on a reactionary measure as opposed to a preventive measure. So I'm all about prevention. So what are we doing on the area of self-awareness in the Black community? The self-esteem part of it. What are we doing with the youth in terms of that? When I was raising my two daughters, I created a self-esteem mirror where they looked at it every day when they got up in the morning and every day before they went to bed. So areas of that and trying to build self-esteem in our children, because you just mentioned it's a generational project. So part of what I'm getting from this is, what are we doing to strengthen the knowledge of legacy, which is part of the generational project, and with that, estate planning. In the Black community, many times when our elders pass on, it usually leaves the debt for the generations that are left behind. So progressively, what can be done? I don't know if your team can do it or somebody along the line of community safety. One more question is, it's not a question, it's a statement. And how can we strengthen the awareness And so what falls in line with that, a financial literacy, something we lack. And these are preventive measures for generations to come. I know we're going to deal with trauma. I know we're going to deal with crisis, but for the next generation coming up, how are we preparing them to do things differently and grow up with a better awareness of who they are?
Yeah, so in terms of the youth specifically, we've definitely done some work in terms of supporting them. So with the work that Part WG does, they also offer youth focus sessions where it's focused on the youth and it's focused on what they need. So for instance, a session will be focused on like, your self-confidence, understanding yourself, knowing who you are. So that's something that we do. We also host a lot of family events where we invite the youth to also come out, and we invite family to come out as a unit. And with the I believe it was a few years ago or last year, we hosted a youth conference as well in collaboration with the North Preston Recreation Center, where we brought about 50 youth from the Preston Township. We took them to an overnight trip to a hotel, and it was very focused on youth empowerment, focused on, knowing who you are, understand your identity. And we brought in a lot of different representation of people within the community that is doing the work. And we really spent that weekend really focused on empowering and encouraging the youth.
Okay, another question. It's not so much a question, it's a statement. So diversity in mental health therapists. So how's your team reaching out to, I know you're working with Robert, which is great, but what about the younger generation of therapists who have different methods and different ways of coping and dealing with trauma and crisis? Are you reaching out to the diverse mental health therapists who can do things maybe a little bit different than, no slight on Robert or anything.
Oh, no, of course.
But what I'm saying is, like, we think differently now.
Yes, yes.
So, and children and youth think differently. So how are we going to get to them? Because it's the next generation. Like, I'm 62. So I've been dealing with racism for 62 years. So to alleviate that for the next generations coming up, how are we planning for that on the preventive end?
So in terms of the support and counselors that we do use, we do try to get people of different ages and different generations. So aside from Robert, we do work with people like Sunday Thomas, Cynthia Jordan as well. And we've learned a lot about the IWK, African Nova Scotian Youth Services, that's been offered. So we try to definitely connect our youth to that program, because that program is specifically tailored to our African Nova Scotian youth. So we do try to reach out to different therapists and supports that do offer different methods, because we understand that we're not a monolith community, so one thing can't work for everybody. And I'm always, part of my work is outreaching and networking, so going to different events, going to different programs that's happening, and really finding out what other people are out there that are doing the work. So I'm always open if you guys have recommendations on different counselors or therapists as well that I think could really support our work. I'm always open to getting more and just keep adding that to my list, and always reaching out to whoever has the capacity to support.
I got one for you.
Yes.
Last but not least, you mentioned about Night of Caring and healing circles.
Yes.
So at the end of those, what are we doing for reference readings for resources?
So
are we handing out, I know we're handing out pamphlets, but the reference readings, like on work that has been done in the past for healing and things like that. So
yeah, so at every session, we always make sure that we have, like you said, a list of resources, a list of, Black mental health counselors and mental support. And what I also try to do is after those sessions, I go out and I speak to people individually. So if there's an individual that comes to me and is looking for that additional support, I do take that extra step of connecting them to a resource via email or phone call. And I try to, check up a few weeks after, a few months after, to make sure that they are properly connected to that.
Okay. So my apologies, I have another meeting, so I have to get to, so I'm going to have to leave. But I thank you very much for your work, and I'll give you the counselor's card.
Yes.
Thanks.
I do. Yep. Two things. There was a mention of prevention of hate and violent extremism. That made me think of two kind of issues that are on the rise right now. One of which is xenophobia. Another one is the epidemic of intimate partner violence and gender-based violence. How are you folks are you folks seeing that in community, and how are you managing that?
I can speak to the intimate partner violence component. So right now, through the Safe City, Safe Spaces program that Community Safety does offer, we are actually working with the Association of Black Social Workers to start a program that's focused on educating and discussing the issue of intimate partner violence within the community and seeing how we could, of course, provide supports and provide resources to help community members following that. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Chair, we are in a stage of learning to so we've done some work that council has directed us to around anti-Asian racism
Mhm.
and Islamophobia. And so, but we understand that we need to broaden how we're looking at this and also figure out how it's showing up in community. Because I think it shows up in very different ways, and we don't know enough yet about what's going on and what our role is. And so we had a workshop in March, I think I mentioned, where we brought some experts in with the support of Public Safety Canada to begin a conversation about how is this showing up? What are the resources we have right now? How are they working? Where are the gaps? And how can we come together to really understand this problem and begin to address it in a more collective way? So I'd say that work is beginning, and I
Okay.
think in our next iteration of the public safety strategy, that will likely, and we haven't done the work yet, but I imagine that will be a priority area for us.
Thank you, Amy. I ask because a couple years back it was an issue that I think emerged in the North End. It might have been something that you're working on as well, where we had an influx of refugee communities as well, and I think it's just the issue of not preparing communities to receive folks, as well as the folks themselves who are kind of integrating themselves into our historic communities, and there tends to be that that collision, be it on a cultural or an ideological basis, and that often exacerbates already difficult circumstances. So I would love to see something a little bit more explicit, intentional down the road. So thank you. I'm glad to hear this work happening. Um, Another thing was there was mention of kind of the healing, the unity, community building. I would just encourage showcasing Black joy. It's an important component. It's not just about coping. It's really about shifting that narrative of self, and obviously perceptions of the community as well. It's important that folks see more Black joy, enjoyment, and all of that. And I think it lends itself well to showing the success and celebrating the work that's happening in community. I love the fact that this work is community led. That's one way to definitely acknowledge folks as well, is to give them that platform and that recognition. So Black joy is an important aspect, I think, to be very explicit about. The last thing from me is, how are you folks managing vicarious trauma for your staff, yourselves, and the CMT? Because of course there's stuff that gets absorbed.
Great, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes, in terms of like what you said, Black joy is very important.
Mhm.
So a big part of what we try to do at CMT is to host one community event in each community, which is really focused on just celebrating people coming out and just having a great time. So we do as well try to focus on not only just the traumatic components of things, but of course like there is beauty in our communities, there is beauty in our history. So just also celebrating that. In terms of the vicarious trauma and so forth, I will say that I am grateful to have a manager and a team that encourages taking time off a lot. So a lot of our community events happen in the evenings and so forth. So my manager does do a good job of saying, no, Divine, come to work late today, maybe take this as a time off. So she does encourage that for us as a staff that is more community facing. For the TMCs, we offer wellness retreats to them every September. So every September we take them to Oak Island, I think we're going to this year, or different places, and provide just a weekend to just get away from the town, get away from the city, have a time that's focused on wellness and also understanding how trauma can impact you and how to take care of yourself. So most of our September retreats are focused on training and also taking care of yourself. And then in March of each year, we offer like strategic planning. And within our CMTs as well, we have two not levels, but two types of CMTs that it could be. You could be a core member or an associate member, and you can fluctuate depending on your capacity, depending on what you're going through and so forth. So we also encourage our CMT members, if you are going through a lot, it's okay. You don't have to come to every meeting if that is too much for you right now. We do encourage them taking time off and stuff. And when critical incidents do happen that is too close to home, we always make sure that this time, let's take care of you instead of you having to be the one supporting each other. So we always try to encourage our CMTs to make sure that they're taking care of themselves and whatever spaces and whatever environments that we could offer for them to just take care of themselves. Also, every December, we do like a social event. So I know a few years ago, we did like a wellness day where we brought in massage therapists from the Eastern College and brought in different people to just kind of, give our CMTs a nice massage and so forth. So we do try to incorporate those things into our yearly plans to make sure that they are being taken care of. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Do you mind just asking James if he has something
Oh,
first? Just because he has.
yeah.
James, do you have anything?
Oh, you good? Okay.
Can I ask another question?
It's.
I'm gonna go
Oh.
first. I just want to come back around to when you had on there, you were talking about the different groups that were engaged, African communities of or how were communities of African descent engaged? So there was conversation around ANZO and the reports, the Worley report, and all that stuff. And then we looked at, you had mentioned the target engagements with Association of Black Social Workers, 902 Man Up, and all the rest of them. So my question is, when we get to, I guess my first question is really, what is the timeline in terms of revamping or updating the strategy, and then what does the engagement look like for that round?
That's a good question. So first, I would say that, well, the plan is to develop a new public safety strategy. Regional Council has directed staff to look for operating efficiencies. And so I think we need to understand what the landscape for this work is moving forward and get direction from Council. I'm hopeful because I think we've done good work and we have good evidence to support moving forward.
Mhm.
And so if we move forward with a new public safety strategy in the same kind of manner that we've done in the past, what would it look like, I think is the question.
Yeah.
And I think we would, we know there's some focus areas and we've been developing relationships with certain communities. You've heard about some of them tonight. I think we would start there with what we know, what we think we know, kind of going to them and seeing if that makes sense and hearing from them what else needs to be there. So a similar process. I think it worked well last time. I don't think there's, what to say? I think there's good work happening in the municipality and in the community right now at a level that maybe wasn't there when we were doing this work back in 2021. And so I think we could maybe be even more focused on what we do next year. But I haven't developed a plan yet. We could start with this committee, and I would be delighted to be invited to do that.
Thank you.
One more question. It says in the rapid response and ongoing support, the healing circles. I have a question about that. Are the sessions with the counselors that the people have, are they confidential? And if they are, what happens to the information that the people are giving out? Once they give all this information out, what happens to it?
Yes, so every session that we do hold is strictly confidential. So we don't report on what people are saying. We don't give any identifying information and stuff. The only thing that we collect is just how many people are present, just reporting to show that people are showing up. So we collect how many people are present, how many male or female, but we do not put or collect any identifying information or share anybody's story in that way. So we do stress, even within the group, we stress community members that this is a confidential and safe space. So we don't want what is being spoken about here to leave the group. And we do, encourage people, if there's been situations like that, then to let us know. But thankfully, we haven't had any issues where something was discussed in our healing circle and somebody heard it elsewhere. Well, part of the beginning of every healing circle is focused on stressing the importance of confidentiality and stressing the importance of this is a safe and brave space for people.
The other part is what you can't answer really because this is the future, but what is intended to happen to the information after it's all collected? Let's say a couple of years down the road, what will be done with it? Will it be used to develop new policies or what? Is that a good question?
I think that's a good question, especially in terms of the data of like the number of attendance and so forth. This is the first, like we're really piloting this program right now. So our goal and hope is that for this to be something that is taken on by the municipality and it becomes something that's implemented into not just the Preston Township, but eventually into different communities and so forth. So the data that we do collect is to use to inform reports like this to, folks like you, to council, to show them that this is work that is being done. This is something that people are responding to, and this is something that we believe should be ongoing.
Any more questions, folks? No? Thank you again, folks.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. So we'll move on to item 9.2, committee member updates. This is the roundtable portion of tonight. Are there any updates from you folks, from your respective communities, ongoing events, things we should be aware of? If there are none. Item number 10, added items, there are none.
If I could I comment at that, number 10?
Sure.
I wanted to talk about Halifax Water and its impact, and I also wanted to talk about an ongoing issue, which is the largest community in HRM Black community, by numbers anyway, is in North Preston, and we don't have anybody from that community here unless I'm incorrect. I believe we should be trying to encourage the rest of the communities of African descent to be on this committee and be at the table. Now back to the Halifax Water. It's two issues. I'll get focused here. Okay, Halifax Water. It will have an impact upon our community because they are planning to automatically increase each member's bill, people's bills, by $300, I believe. You can correct me if that's wrong, but this is what I understand. I believe that we should, or somebody should, on behalf of the HRM, because they're part of the HRM, to let them know that that plan will not work and that the community would not benefit from that. And they said they're doing it because they have a deficit. Welcome to the real world. Everybody has a deficit. So you can't increase our bill just because you want to. So I believe that someone should, I believe we should make it a priority to let them know that they are going in the wrong direction. And if I don't know the procedure, but if we can make a motion, I'd be willing to make a motion on that and pass it through, or whatever, Mr. Chairman. How should I proceed with this?
Dorothy, is that something we can request a report or a presentation on?
It might be helpful to maybe at a future meeting invite Halifax Water to present on what they're proposing and the changes, and then maybe move from that.
Okay, so can I make the motion then? I move that we invite Halifax Water to come to our committee and explain the increase in rates.
Yeah, we don't really need a motion, but yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's okay.
So we'll discuss that at our next agenda planning
Okay.
meeting.
thank you. Great.
Find a time for that.
Now, if I could throw the other one in, this has been a longstanding issue. I believe that within the HRM, there are numerous Black communities that are not represented. And what I noticed when I first joined was that all the communities in the HRM that are of African descent would be around this table. And the fact that the largest in number Black community, North Preston, is not represented, I believe we should make it our business to fix that problem. And my question is, have we been doing anything about that? Has there been any effort or any intention to deal with that, or recruiting people from there, or whatever? Has there been any movement on that at all? And also other communities that are not represented?
Dorothy, can you remind us the vacancies that we still have on the committee, if at all?
I believe recruitment just wrapped up. And new members will be joining when that is finalized. In accordance with the terms of reference, I can pull it up on, in terms of which communities are represented on this committee. But I think, Russell, if I'm wrong, most vacancies have been,
Yeah, so most vacancies have been addressed through the recent recruitment, and then when those new members are added to the committee, we should be at full capacity based on the admin order that outlined all those communities and who would be representing on the committee.
Jerry, can we revisit that when we have our new members come in? Okay, perfect. So moving on to item 11, date of the next meeting is June 12th, 2025, and it will be held virtually to accommodate a presentation from an Ontario-based organization. Their presentation will be based on their research on the effects of climate change on marginalized communities. I think there will be some materials or information circulated before that meeting, so please, folks, do read up so you can be well informed and ask some engaging questions. Yep. I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm sure they're connected to the work, but I don't think it's them, it's her specifically. It's an issue here. Thank you. So we can move to the adjournment. Can I get a mover to adjourn the meeting, please? Thank you, Renee. The meeting is adjourned.